You're listening to the Liberty Talks podcast with Michael Anderson, with contributor to the program, Fancy.
Yee yee.
We have to find a way to talk and have dialogue and be tolerant between other views.
You have to have open dialogue, and that's where free speech is so important.
Consent's a very important thing, and today in the Me Too movement, it's been very important because I think it's really opened up a lot of eyes.
I think we should get away from this hookup culture and get back to relationships, because when you have a relationship, you have that communication, you have that connection.
If you committed sexual assault, it doesn't matter when it was, you should be held accountable for that. However, we have to make sure that we actually make sure they committed sexual assault, and we have to make sure that all allegations are verified.
They'll put in these programs thinking that it'll help everyone, but what they forget is that the pathway to hell is paved with good intention.
And I think that's what this whole movement is all about anyways, is trying to be open to ideas.
So welcome to the podcast. Today we have contributor to the program, Fancy. Fancy is, like many of our contributors and people that are on the Liberty Talks team, is originally from Young Americans for Liberty in Houston, of my alma mater while I was the Texas State Chair. So thank you, Fancy, for joining the Liberty Talks team and being a contributor on this podcast today.
What up, what up, what up? It's pretty great to be here.
Awesome. And hopefully we'll be seeing more and hearing more of Fancy in the future. But tonight we're going to be talking about Dan Crenshaw, community solutions and voluntarism during the government shutdown. So in case you guys are unaware, during the government shutdown, Dan Crenshaw did some really amazing things, and I don't think he got nearly enough media attention for what he did. During the government shutdown, everybody was rightfully complaining about government workers not getting paid. So what did Dan Crenshaw do? He decided to have a food drive. So he came out and said, hey, look, if you're in Houston, we need your help. Bring grocery, gift cards, and non-perishable food items to Second Baptist Church. And he did this in the middle of the government shutdown, I think actually right before the government shutdown ended.
Yeah, about a week.
A week before, right? So what did you think about this, Fancy? Like, what was your first take?
Honestly, I grew up with a kid. I'm not going to name him, but his father's a air traffic controller at Hobby Airport, and they were going through a hard time. And so my buddy David, his dad is an air traffic controller, and like they went through some pretty harsh times this shutdown, like about to lose their house and trying to feed their kids and stuff. And I mean, like Crenshaw did that and started bringing them like things that they really needed. And it's, I don't know, I guess because people see the government as not like a business, even though it's ran like a business. If you don't have the budget for it, you're not going to get the money. So, I mean, if a business runs out of money anywhere in the private sector, anyone that works for that business is screwed. All right. They have to go without pay, or they have to find a new job. Same thing with this, except it's an essential industry. I mean, the government owns every airport.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a pretty powerful story, and it's something that really made me think about these type of things when we heard about TSA agents not getting paid, air traffic controllers not getting paid. This is actually something that I actually had an agreement with AOC on. She was saying that an air traffic controller in her district was essentially what she was saying was that it's a very stressful job, right? And adding to the fact that you're not getting paid and you have a stressful job, how much more dangerous of a situation this could be. And it really begs the question, in some of these jobs, why are they only funded by the government? Like, why does the government have the monopoly to only fund these areas like air traffic controller? Why are they not funded by local government or just privatized?
Why are they put under the non-essential category?
I mean, I think if they're non-essential, then they shouldn't be a part of the federal government.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, but let's just go to the plain argument why they're non-essential. I'm sorry, but I think a congressman is less essential than a guy that promotes industry. I mean, like, how do you consider something essential versus non-essential? National parks, non-essential, but anything to do with airports has to be essential in our 21st century way of living.
No, I get exactly what you're saying. It doesn't seem like a super libertarian argument, so I'm a little shocked to hear you say this, but I mean, it doesn't make your point any less valid. If you want to talk about what is essential to, I guess, like safety and the government, you need to make sure that your planes are getting from point A to point B safely, right? Like, why, even though TSA is an institution that has a 90% fail rate, you think that people that are guarding, traffic and guarding airports are really, really important, almost like emergency services, right? Imagine if our local government had a government shutdown and they just shut down fire and police, right? It's like, what? Okay, maybe let's stop paying the mayor and start paying our firemen and our policemen.
Yeah, exactly what I was saying. Like, you that would be like considering fire and police peacekeepers as non-essential while your mayor is still doing her 9 to 5.
Exactly. So I totally get you on that. And here, I'm gonna actually play this video of Dan Crenshaw on his YouTube channel telling us about the food drive. Pretty much this is voluntarism in real life, people getting things done without government coercion, just asking for money, people feeling the need to step up and help their fellow man.
Free market provides.
Hey Houston, we're here at Kroger. We got our first major donor. We're very excited about this food drive tomorrow. Saul, say hi. This is son Hamas in the background.
Hello, guys.
Very generous. This is what they just did for our cause. $3,000.
Thank you, Congressman.
That's all of those gift cards right there. We are going to be dropping these off at Second Baptist. So again, meet us at Second Baptist tomorrow. This is in Kingwood, North Campus, Second Baptist tomorrow, 1 to 4 p.m. We're still doing the food drive, even though the president just announced today that we're going to reopen the government. Here's why. First of all, a lot of these federal workers are still it's going to take some time to actually get them paid. It's just the way the payment system works. It's going to be a few days. Second of all, and perhaps most importantly, a lot of the food banks in the area have been depleted. Because they've been depleted, let's still do this food drive, all right? Because, again, federal workers have had to use a lot of these food banks for a while now, and our resources have gone down quite a bit. So it's still on. We've got the momentum. Let's do this. See you then.
So a couple of things I want to point out in that. This is conservative Republican Dan Crenshaw seeing a need to step up in his community and doing exactly that. He said, hey, look, the food banks have been depleted. Even though that the government is not going to be shut down anymore, we still need to do this. And you know what? Preferably don't buy food, buy gift cards, because it's things that people can actually use as an individual to serve their individual needs. I thought this was just fantastic.
Honestly, I'm glad that Crenshaw was the one to finally step up in our area and do it. There were other smaller time politicians, but a lot of them were more all bark and no bite, if you know what I'm saying.
Right. One of our contributors, Christian, likes to say they're all meat and no sauce.
Yeah.
It's a Gucci Mane quote.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. You know, they say they do stuff for the community, but they don't really get up and do it. And even though you guys didn't get to see that video, I want to point out that the man that was, spent $3,000, his son was wearing a MAGA hat. And it's like, okay. Yeah, right. It's like, oh no, look out for the red hood, or the white hood was really a red hat, right? It's like, look out for that. But these people are the people that stood up in their community and spent money and helped out the individuals that had a need in their community.
Every time that my mind starts dazing, I think about all the things I could say, and I wanna know if you know that you're the star that I can't stop chasing. Sometimes when I daydream, I'm looking at you and I can't stop thinking, do you know you're amazing? When you smile, girl, my heart starts racing. I'm falling for you, got a confession, don't know what to do. Had my heart broken, I know you did too. Let's work together, we can do better. Nevertheless, you are simply the best. Feel like my heart's about to beat out my chest. Can't find the words, but I'm not gonna stress. Couple of things that I'd like to confess. I have a confession.
So guys, I want to take a minute to talk about how we are doing so much here at Liberty Talks. And I have one word for you: Anchor. Anchor.fm is how we went from being on over just a few podcast hosting sites to being on over a dozen podcast hosting sites. And that includes iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, all the mainstream podcast hosting sites. You search, you can find Liberty Talks. And not only that, but Anchor actually helps you build your podcast, record your podcast, put ads on your podcast, even have background music. So it's a really awesome service that you can use that we endorse here at Liberty Talks. Please check it out at anchor.fm.
So another thing that happened as well actually happened here where I'm at in Little Rock, Arkansas. The TSA at, Clinton National, they have obviously not gotten paid, just like workers at the TSA and government officials in Houston, everywhere else all over the country. And the leadership for Greater Little Rock actually visited the Clinton National Airport and helped give out food. They bought roughly over 100 agents food at the airport, and they were serving breakfast and lunch. So the airport stood up along with this leadership foundation of Little Rock and said, hey, look, we're going to provide you food for coming to work and without getting paid. This is communities, and not just individuals like Dan Crenshaw, but organizations and private businesses stepping up to take care of their workers here in Little Rock, Arkansas.
It's kind of amazing to see in our generation. Like, it's something that the average person growing up doesn't see that much, but for someone like my father's generation growing up in the 50s and 40s, that was commonplace. The private sector provided charities and picking up people when they're down on their feet. Not only by private sector, I mean churches and charitable people in general.
Right, and this is exactly what happened in Arkansas. We had a leadership foundation step up and say, hey, we're going to take care of our TSA agents when the government is not helping us out. And same with the airport itself. The airport was providing food, breakfast, lunch to their workers. So it's almost like when we had Hurricane Harvey in Houston, we had the Liberty Coalition for Disaster Relief. When there's a hurricane and the government won't step up to help, who's going to help Texas, right? We are individuals, organizations coming together. And it's like you said, it was phenomenal to see Dan Crenshaw step up in his community and give back and really make a call to action to help out individuals with real and drastic needs in his community.
It's like people have become so dependent on the government as their like plan Z that they don't realize, what if the government doesn't have the resources, it can't get there, or everything's just squandered? What do you do then? Well, the only thing you can do is rely on your fellow man, your neighbor.
You do a really good job in pointing out that our generation and younger generations really don't see that or understand that. It's our parents and our grandparents' generations that were close with one another and would help each other out.
I will say this. I don't want younger people, because we are younger people, feeling like we're like, yes, the boomers were the greatest generation. But, I mean, they weren't. They had their faults just like us. But I think that's something that they did wonderfully. Yeah, that's something that they did a lot better than us.
Well, it's not really our fault at the same time. I mean, look at this overreaching government. I mean, just this government that is it's just invested in every little nook and cranny of your life. It used to not be that way, and it gave the free market and private business this leeway to help people out and organizations to lend a helping hand rather than the non-participators in society who just live off of the teat of government. So it's something that we can get better at. This is something in the government shutdown. It's always been bittersweet to me. And I'm sure you can understand as a libertarian or can relate, because
well, as a libertarian, the government shutdown's always bitter. Because regardless, the pay is just furloughed, which means they're going to get paid in the end for all the hours that they worked. It's just that they don't get them. In the end, we're still spending the same amount of money. The problem is people are suffering because of it.
Right. So, and that's kind of the point. So there's many different points when it comes to government shutdown. One, it provides this platform for libertarians to have a conversation saying, okay, well, when the government can't do X, who will? Us, me, you, individuals, organizations, right? The free market will provide. But it gives people a reason to complain, and rightfully so, for not getting paid. They're forced to go to work and they don't get paid. It almost seems like slavery with an extra few steps, right? At first, but they do get back pay. So people are hurting at first, but they are going to get back pay. But this is kind of the idea, right? Like it allows people to have these open-minded conversations of, well, if TSA and air traffic control are non-essential services, how come they're not ran by a private business or privatized or by a local government, since the federal government thinks this is non-essential?
Ironically, San Francisco does that.
Yeah, that is pretty ironic, San Francisco.
The biggest money pit in California.
Well, maybe they realized that TSA wasn't the best for them. I mean, it's like I said, 90% fail rate. You think this probably does need to be turned over to private business instead of run by the government.
Well, I mean, yeah, because I think Reason TV did a short documentary on a San Francisco privatized airport security, and like they had a 99.5 success rate at finding not just narcotics, but contraband, anything that the TSA would list as contraband.
So what do you think people should be doing during these government shutdowns? Like, final thoughts. Do you think these community solutions is what we should be sticking to? Do we need to like bring our rhetoric up about saying, hey, look, when the government shut down, we can privatize things, we can turn things over to individuals and organizations. What do you think the best thing to do is during a government shutdown?
I think for government shutdowns, the best thing to do is what you consider non-essential, you need to turn over to the private sector. Because ultimately, even the non-essentials are essential, if that makes any sense. You can
unique value to their life, and no one is more important or understood. I mean, it makes sense. It's like, look, I mean, we as libertarians, we want to abolish or maybe privatize the TSA, but we don't not want to have security at the airports. So we want security. We just don't want the government to be running the security.
Correct, because they do a horrible job.
Exactly. So these industries that are, that government have a monopoly over, that they're the only way you can get into these industries, it seems like they need to be turned over and privatized, turned over to the free market, to organizations, or even to a local government, so that way they can make the best decisions. And I'd also say that these community solutions, voluntaryism, this is where it's all at. We have to show people that at the end of the day, we are all humans working together, and we don't have to be forced to work together. We do it voluntarily because we recognize that every life has intrinsic value, and every individual has this, unique value to their life, and no one is more important or has more rights than any other man. Thank you for listening to Liberty Talks podcast. We are now on over 10 different platforms. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Spreaker, and YouTube.